sound of a mother fighting for her daughter's life after an Arizona 2-year-old was found in the back seat of a hot car.
What's going on?
My baby was in the car. She's not responsive.
The girl's father now faces the most severe charge in his daughter's death: first-degree murder.
All right, sir at the jail, what is your full name?
Parker Scholtes.
For the first time, we're hearing the harrowing 911 call when the girl was first found in the car and her mother's reaction as she tries to save her youngest daughter's life.
How long has it been? Half hour. It was, but it turned off. I've been checking. Oh my God.
It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on July 9th when Parker Scholtes arrived at her Marana, Arizona home. Almost immediately, she knew something wasn't right.
What's the location of your...
911, 911, please.
What's the address? What's going on?
My baby was in the car. She's not responsive.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to transfer you to medical dispatcher. Stay on the line.
Oh my God, oh my God.
That's Erica's husband, 37-year-old Christopher Scholtes. Prosecutors say he's the one who left 2-year-old Parker Scholtes in the backseat of his Honda Acura.
And what are you reporting?
She was in the car sleeping. She's unresponsive.
Okay. And who is she?
Please, please.
Who
My
is she?
daughter. My daughter.
And this was out in the driveway?
Yes.
Is she still breathing?
No, she's not breathing right now.
Okay, we need to start CPR right now.
Yes, we are. We're starting CPR, yes.
The help is on the way to you. I need to hear CPR. I need them to count it out for me. 1, 2, 3,
1, 2,
4.
3. But my wife's a doctor. My wife's a doctor. She's home.
Okay.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
On the 911 recording, you can actually hear Erica performing CPR on Parker. Erica is a doctor at the Banner University Medical Center, Tucson.
No. Come on, baby.
At one point, Christopher reports that Parker is breathing, but it's not the case.
Okay, she's coughing. She's coughing. Oh, that's compressing. Oh my God, baby.
Erica continues CPR until emergency responders arrive.
CPR is still going on.
Yeah, CPR is still going on.
Okay. You're going to perform that until the units arrive and take over for you.
Baby. 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 Baby.
Two-year-old Parker was taken to the same hospital where her mother works. She was later pronounced dead. Investigators determined she'd spent 3 hours in direct sunlight, her temperature even reaching 108 degrees Fahrenheit. As all of this was happening, Christopher Scholtes was apparently distracted inside.
Apparently, he was inside playing video games, so that's especially problematic. That's not an excuse that anybody is going to give any credence to whatsoever.
That's litigator Rich Schoenstein, who says Scholtes may be up against a solid case from the prosecution.
The texts where his wife is telling him not to do that is really devastating for his defense.
Since Scholtes' arrest, reports surfaced that he had a history of leaving his daughters in the backseat of the car. So much so that Erica apparently texted him about it, saying, quote, "I told you to stop leaving them in the car. How many times have I told you?" But at Scholtes' initial appearance, Erica came to her husband's defense.
This was a big mistake, and I think that this doesn't represent him. So I'm just asking if you can allow him to come home to us so we can all start the grieving process so that he can bury our daughter with us this upcoming week and that we can go through this whole process together as a family.
Parker's death was originally ruled an accident, and her father was charged with second-degree murder. But just last week, all that changed. He originally was charged with second-degree murder, but now it has been bumped up to first degree. Do you have any idea why there would have been that change?
Yeah, well, I think there are two facts that are sort of probably compelling here. You know, I said as soon as I find out you left him in the car, that's all I need to know. But we did learn a couple of additional things. One is apparently he was inside playing video games. So that's especially problematic. That's not an excuse that anybody is going to give any credence to whatsoever. And then I think even worse than that, there's some evidence that he had done this before and had been told not to do it by his wife. So it wasn't just a first time mistake, which you might be able to, I don't know if you could completely forgive it, but you might get past it. And this seems to be repeated behavior.
In addition to that first-degree murder charge, he also faces a child abuse charge. Do you think that's warranted?
Yes. Again, as a father, leaving a child alone in the back of a car, that to me is child abuse. I'd have to look at the legal standard. I would hear the charge from the jury and consider the evidence. But I view leaving a 2-year-old in a car by themselves, really for any length of time to be abusive.
The change in Scholtes' charges came by way of grand jury. So I'm always interested when we hear a grand jury because we don't know exactly what happened behind those closed doors. But do you have any sort of inclination or idea what may have gone on to have him be indicted on this first-degree murder charge?
Well, the grand jury is presented with the prosecution's side of the case only. The defense isn't heard from. So I don't put, when I hear the grand jury is indicted with somebody, I understand that the prosecution has enough evidence to move forward, but I don't know at that point that they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt or they can get a jury of 12 to convict. So I'm not surprised at all, just based on the evidence you and I have talked about in the last couple of minutes, that they would go to a grand jury and a grand jury would say, okay, it's appropriate to have an indictment at that level for this person.
So let's talk about the evidence as we know it. According to what Scholtes told investigators, he arrived at home at about 2 p.m. on July 9th. He said that Parker had fallen asleep in the car and he didn't want to wake her, so he parked the car, kept it running, and turned on the air conditioning. But according to surveillance video, Scholtes actually arrived home a full hour earlier than he said, pulling into the driveway at 12:53 p.m. That means Parker was in the hot car for more than 3 hours by the time her mom got home. There's also a couple of discrepancies in what he originally told investigators and then what they were able to confirm with surveillance video. So I guess he was saying that he went out and checked on the girl periodically, and apparently that didn't actually happen. And then there's also discrepancies between when he arrived home, how long she was in the car. So does that mean it's a little problematic for him?
Yeah, that's problematic in two respects. One is the story he told where he checked on her and it wasn't that long. That's a more palatable story than the actual facts where he didn't check on her and it was longer. But then the second part of that, Sierra, is that he lied about it. And anytime you want to make a deal with authorities or you want to get past something, when they find out you're lying to them, they're not going to be happy. And so that is a second problem for him.
Another factor in all of this is that he apparently said he knew the history of the car. Once you keep it on with the air going, apparently it stays on for 30 minutes and then it automatically shuts off, which apparently is what happened in this case. The air must have been on at some point, but then it shut off and the girl was in there for several hours. But this dad apparently knew that that was going to happen. So does that make things even more severe for him, knowing the passage of time has been more than 30 minutes? I should be checking on the girl.
Yeah, I think that's another contributing factor. If he understood the amount of time that the thing would go off and either did or didn't know that that amount of time had passed. So I've had children asleep in the back seat of my car, right? I'm the father of 2. That is a time-honored method of getting kids to sleep, is put them in the back of the car and drive around. And sometimes it's frustrating if you get home and it's not time to wake them and you know that if you take them out of the car, they're going to wake up. You don't want them to wake up, but that's too bad. You have 2 options. You can keep driving and stay in the car, or you can take the child out. There is no third option of leave the kid in the car.
But allegedly, Scholtes has a history of leaving his daughters inside the car. After Parker's death, detectives spoke with Scholtes' other 2 daughters, who said he'd left them in the backseat of the car before. His older daughter, from a different relationship, has also come forward, saying it's something she recalls from her childhood too. On the way to the hospital with Parker, Erica allegedly texted her husband, quote, "I told you to stop leaving them in the car. How many times have I told you?" I think that's also leading into the next part, the fact that he had apparently done this in the past, at least according to his 2 other daughters who were interviewed. This is something that their dad did. And then we actually have a text message from his wife that said, "I told you to stop leaving them in the car." Are these things that would be brought in at a future trial?
Absolutely, because this is, we sometimes talk about whether prior bad acts are admissible at trial, but these are not just bad acts to show his character. These are prior acts that demonstrate that this is the kind of conduct he engaged in, which makes it more likely that he did so here. But it also goes to his state of mind. I mean, the texts where his wife is telling him not to do that is really devastating for his defense. He's been warned. So he can't claim it was an innocent mistake that he, didn't realize could be a problem. He had been told it is a problem.
But texts about leaving the girls in the car weren't the only ones that Erica allegedly sent to her husband. At least according to some of the texts I've seen, it looks like he may have some sort of issue with alcoholism. Drunk driving is one of the texts that I saw that had been mentioned. So is this something that maybe his defense could play up on? He's battling other demons, so to speak, and not as focused on his parental duties?
I don't think that works as a defense. I mean, first of all, I'm drunk is not a defense to any crime. So if that was the defense, if he's like, "Oh, I was drunk and I went inside and forgot," that wouldn't get you off the hook. The fact of an addiction wouldn't get you off the hook. Now, again, it might be relevant at sentencing. If it's sentencing, you said to the judge, "This is a person who's been struggling with addiction and he's now in a program and he's now sober and he's working on it." That might be something someone would consider at sentencing, but I don't think it affects guilt.
Scholtes' daughters also told investigators that while Parker was inside the hot car, he was inside playing PlayStation. Unfortunately, this is a story that we've covered in the past on Law and Crime, and every couple years we see the headlines where something like this happens and a parent leaves their child in a vehicle and unfortunately they pass away. So it isn't something that's completely unheard of. As a parent, it seems like could be your worst nightmare. So this is something that is completely preventable, and the dad definitely knows what could happen. There could be prosecution and he could end up in prison. So why do you think he would have gone inside to play his video games?
I don't know. Parents make all kinds of mistakes, including myself. We always make all kinds of mistakes. That's part of being a parent. There is no guidebook you get at the beginning of this. So some mistakes are worse than others, and this is just an unacceptable mistake. I have no idea why someone would go inside to play video games while their child is sleeping in the back of the car. I just can't even get my head around that, to tell you the truth.
Scholtes made his first court appearance while still charged with second-degree murder, where his plea was entered.
Sir, you are here because you've been charged with second-degree murder as a domestic violence offense and child abuse as a domestic violence offense. You do have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. You do have an attorney present, Mr. Romero, who is present by video. Sir, I am going to enter a not guilty plea for you. Pretrial Services is recommending that I hold you on a bond based solely on the charge.
Scholtes' defense argued he should receive a low bond based on his history and the nature of the case.
Your Honor, the state's recommendation is unreasonable given the circumstances in this case. This is an unfortunate family tragedy. Mr. Scholtes has lived in Arizona his entire life. The purposes of a bond, Your Honor, as you know, is based upon whether or not Mr. Scholtes has a criminal history, which he has an old DUI that's over 15 years old. I know that his family is going through a lot right now, and I know it's extremely difficult for Mr. Scholtes.
Prosecutors countered, asking for a higher bond.
the nature of the offense is also considered as well. Of most concern to the state in the interim complaint is the lack of truth telling by the defendant when interviewed by the police. That was quickly contradicted by police, as well as his awareness of not only the timing that the car would shut off, but the text messages between him and his wife indicating that there was an awareness that this was an issue long before this happened. So given the nature of the offense, the state is requesting the $1 million bond.
During all this, Erica actually addressed the court, describing how Parker's death has affected her entire family.
So thank you for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to say that no one understands how great of a tragedy this is more than myself, my girls, my remaining 2 daughters, and Christopher. So not only do we have to move forward with grieving for my daughter, but we potentially could be losing their father. So the absolute worst case scenario for our family is if Chris would be away from us. We're already hurting. No one else shares this bond and this trauma like all of us, all 4 of us. I know the significance of the tragedy, and I don't want you to think for a second that I underestimate the impact that it has on our lives, on everyone's lives, or that I'm undermining your concerns about the safety of those in our household. So I'm just asking if you can allow him to come home to us so we can all start the grieving process so that he can bury our daughter with us this upcoming week, and that we can go through this whole process together as a family.
In the end, a judge ruled in Scholtes' favor.
Mr. Scholtes has significant ties to the community, no criminal history whatsoever. This is the kind of offense that is extremely unlikely to reoccur. I don't believe that he poses a danger to the community now, although his actions on that day may have. For all of those reasons, I am actually going to release him to pretrial services supervision. I don't believe that a money bond is appropriate at this time.
Do you think that that was the right thing to do in the case of the judge allowing him to be released?
I understand. Again, I understand the decision because the family apparently wanted him back, and it is a tough time for the family. So presuming that the court felt secure that he would be around for trial, I'm okay with it. It's not a public safety issue. He's not going to, leave other people in the back of a car unattended. It's an issue for him and his family. So I think all things being equal, I'm okay with it.
As the case moves forward, it's possible the state takes a look back at the past. We talked briefly about how this type of case is one that we've covered before. We've all seen the headlines or watched the news articles about it. So as far as moving forward, do you think that the prosecution or the defense could refer back to some of these highly publicized cases about the same topic?
I think possibly the prosecution could point out that, he may have heard about this kind of thing in the news before, and therefore, again, would have had the state of mind to understand that it was dangerous. That is the only way I could see it actually being relevant in the case itself. I suppose the prosecution might argue, again, focusing on sentencing, because I think the defense will say, you don't need to sentence him. The death of his child is enough punishment. He's been punished. He has to deal with that his entire life. And I think the prosecution might say, this keeps happening, and unless we give actual consequences to the people who do this, it's not going to stop. So maybe the prosecution would use it in that respect, again, at sentencing.
With that in mind, if and when it comes time for sentencing, prosecutors may be looking to make an example out of Scholtes.
Punishment is supposed to be, or sentencing is supposed to be a combination of deterrence, punishment, and rehabilitation. So they may argue that this is valuable for the deterrent effect. They may argue that.
But what about the other side of things? And we've talked a lot about the prosecution's case because there is a lot of evidence so far that seems like a win for them. But if we're talking about his defense, is there any sort of defense?
I don't know what facts the defendant would offer. I mean, he might challenge some of the specifics, how long it is, whether he checked on her, the air conditioning was supposed to be on. I mean, maybe he's going to challenge some of those facts. But I actually think that the question for this case is at sentencing, because this is a father with two other daughters and a wife who has said that's not who this guy is, and actually wanted him released to come back to the family. So really the question for me is what's appropriate to do with this person having made this mistake? Do you put them in jail where they're now away from the rest of their family who probably needs them more than ever? You know, that is the big question for me. The guilt part is not that big a question.
Moving forward, what do you expect in the case? This just happened recently, so there's a lot of future hearings ahead of us, but what do you expect?
Well, I understand the prosecution has charged the highest degree charge they could come up with here, and I think that may be appropriate given the facts that have come out. I would expect a pretty serious plea negotiation. I would expect a pretty intense negotiation here because there's not a lot to go to trial about, I don't think. Again, I don't really see what the defense's case is on whether or not he committed the crime. I can see sort of the defense at sentencing, and probably the plea negotiation depends on what the prosecution would offer in terms of a sentence.
Scholtes is due back in court on Thursday for his arraignment. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.